Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an incredibly tense, multi-layered clash of worldviews, all sparked by a single, shocking act of devotion. We're going to look at a deeply vivid scene from our sources, where fiercely held beliefs about tradition, economics, and prophecy just violently collide in one small, incredibly awkward room. So, let's get right into it. This act was wasteful, immodest, and completely contradicts everything you said before. Man, that is a deeply explosive, almost venomous accusation. And to understand why this specific, harsh critique was hurled at Jesus by an outraged observer, we really can't just look at the event in a vacuum. We have to examine the ideological powder keg that was sitting right there in the room before the match was struck. Part 1, The Law and Love. To fully grasp the tension in the room, we've got to look at the atmosphere right before the controversy actually hits. Here's the core friction. On one side, you have traditionalists demanding strict, unwavering adherence to old commandments. They're specifically citing Ecclesiastes, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. But then, this black and white worldview is suddenly thrown right up against Jesus' new, highly disruptive paradigm. He insists on identifying with the marginalized and offers this sweeping counter-directive: a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. I mean, just imagine spending your entire life measuring your worth by how perfectly you check off a strict list of rules, and suddenly, the whole paradigm shifts to something as completely immeasurable as love. Honestly, that's pretty terrifying for a rule follower. So this represents a fundamental shift in religious mechanics. When he's challenged about the traditional pillars of the faith, we're talking the temple, the sacrifices, the law, and the feasts, Jesus argues they aren't being abolished, right? Instead, they are fulfilled in him. He is essentially ripping up the foundation of their religious motivation. It's no longer about strict mechanical duty. Keeping the law is now framed entirely as a natural response to God's love. It's a massive, worldview-shattering shift, and it leaves the traditionalist in the room feeling incredibly uneasy. Moving on to part 2, the costly anointing. Right in the middle of this high-minded, super tense debate about the law, a woman named Mary suddenly enters the room, and she's carrying an alabaster jar of spikenard. Now, spikenard wasn't just your everyday perfume. It was pure, unadulterated essential oil imported all the way from the Himalayan mountains. It was astronomically rare. And what does she do? She breaks it and pours this intensely aromatic substance straight over Jesus' feet. This deeply intimate, totally visceral act instantly shatters the intellectual atmosphere in the room, triggering absolute outrage from two completely different factions. Which brings us to part 3, the pragmatic objection. The very first wave of backlash comes from an incredibly practical, accounting-driven standpoint. Judas brings forward a strict economic argument, saying, why was this ointment not sold? This could have been given to the poor. This could be used for supplies, shelter. This is a waste. Judas is taking a highly utilitarian view here. From his perspective, he actually thinks he's holding Jesus accountable to his own words. I mean, Jesus just finished preaching about caring for the poor, and right in front of them is a massive, highly liquid financial asset literally evaporating into the dirt. It's a grievance that honestly is kind of hard to argue with on paper. To put that into perspective, our source text notes this perfume was worth hundreds of denarii. Now, in that era, a single denarius was a full day's wage for common labor. So do the math. We're talking about almost an entire year's salary. In modern terms, imagine someone literally pouring $30,000 or $40,000 straight onto a dirt floor. Seeing that staggering number, Judas's financial grievance actually seems incredibly logical, doesn't it? Why waste liquid gold when people are starving right outside the door? You can practically feel the sticker shock radiating through the room. Now let's look at part 4, the traditionalist rejection. So while Judas is over there doing the math, an observer named Shmuel attacks from a completely different angle: strict social traditionalism. Shmuel's grievances aren't financial at all. They're deeply cultural. He is absolutely horrified by the optics. In this highly structured society, he finds it completely degrading for a woman to touch a rabbi's feet. He views the open display of emotion as totally shameless. He even points out that Mary's hair is uncovered, which was a severe breach of first-century modesty rules. Basically, Shmuel sees the entire spectacle as hypocritical. He calls it an abomination that completely ruins his willingness to believe in Jesus' message. For Shmuel, this isn't just a waste of money, it's a total breakdown of social order. So we are left with a massive dilemma. Is this act a tremendous financial waste, just like the pragmatists argue? Or is it an immodest abomination, as the strict traditionalists claim? With simultaneous outrage coming from both the utilitarian accountants and the religious rule followers, how does Jesus justify allowing this seemingly indefensible act to happen? Let's see exactly how he threads this needle. Finally, Part 5, Anointed for Burial. Jesus shuts down his critics, but he doesn't do it by arguing, accounting, or debating the nuances of modesty laws. Instead, he just completely shatters their entire framework. First, he flat out defends Mary, commanding the room to leave her alone, and identifies her scandalous act as something uniquely beautiful. Second, he recontextualizes their rigid view of charity. He agrees the poor are vital, but emphasizes a terrifyingly limited window of time, telling them, "You will not always have me." And finally, he drops a prophetic bombshell that immediately silences the room. She is preparing his body.
She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. Wow. Just think about the dramatic irony of this entire scene. You've got all these guys in the room aggressively arguing over perfume budgets, social optics, proper rabbinic decorum, and Jesus is trying to prepare them for his own impending execution. Mary is literally the only person in the room who intuitively grasps the absolute gravity of the moment. She's offering this extravagant act of mourning before the tragedy even happens. She sees what the rest of them are completely blind to.
And Jesus doesn't stop there. While Shmuel declares the act a total disgrace, Jesus elevates Mary's scandalous act to an eternal legacy. He cements this moment as an essential, inseparable piece of his worldwide message. The takeaway here is really profound. This extravagant, messy, incredibly costly act of devotion is exactly what his kingdom values, completely bypassing the rigid, logical structures demanded by his critics. He's showing us that sometimes pure devotion just doesn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet or a rulebook. Which leaves us, and the completely stunned disciples in that room, with one echoing question. Wait, for burial? The tension shifts instantly, from loud, self-righteous outrage to this chilling, quiet confusion. The arguments over money and tradition just fade away. If the Messiah is being anointed for burial right now, what exactly is coming next? It really forces us to ask ourselves, when confronted with profound disruptive truth, are we busy balancing the ledger, or are we actually paying attention to the moment? Thanks so much for exploring this with me, and keep seeking the layers behind the story.